Great. Well, it looks like we've got a number of folks logged on here, so we can go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. My name is Maya Swope. I'm the Outreach and Volunteer Coordinator here at Friends of the Boundary Waters. We've got two great speakers on today. So we'll have Scott, who's our Policy Director, and Senator Jen McKeown, who's one of our great advocates in the legislature, both on to talk about some of the work that we've been doing to protect clean water, protect the boundary waters in Lake Superior. If you do have any questions throughout the presentation, we have a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. So we will try to get to as many as we can at the end, and we might have some time throughout if you've got questions about any of the different topics that we'll cover. If you have kind of general comments or anything else, technical issues, that sort of thing, feel free to use the chat button, and that should be at the bottom of your screen as well, and we can do that. I will also turn on the closed captioning in a minute here. If you click the CC button, there'll be an option for you to turn that off if you don't want to see that. So kind of before I get into all of this, if you've been on Lunch with the Friends for the past couple of years, you might have seen my face a lot doing these introductions. This will be my last Lunch with the Friends. I have just accepted a new position at the Nature Conservancy, so I'll be unfortunately leaving Friends of the Boundary Waters, and I'm sad to not see all of you anymore and leave this great team, but you might see some other faces kind of popping up to host Lunch with the Friends in the future, and I'm grateful to all of you for sticking with us through all this pandemic webinars and all of that. But I will kind of just go ahead and jump into it. Maybe I will turn it over to you, Scott, to give a little bit more of an introduction.
Yeah, absolutely. And since this is Maya's last Lunch with the Friends, I encourage everybody to say thanks to Maya. We would certainly not be where we are today without her work, and so we're super supportive of that. And obviously, we can't be too mad. You're going to one of our fellow environmental organizations, so we can't be too upset about that. I will say, I was going to say this for the end, but sorry to move on so quickly, but we are already posting and hiring for Maya's position. And so if you know any good organizers, anybody who wants to really get in, and be part of our team, and if you're on this call, you probably have a good idea of some of the stuff Maya does. So, feel free to share that around. Maya, if you can post your own job description, or your own job link in the chat, that'd be great. But yeah, so we're definitely going to miss Maya, but if you want to be the next Maya, big shoes to fill, or if you know somebody who could be that role, please feel free to share that far and wide. But yeah, so today, obviously, a special session is the asterisk to all this, of course, but the legislative session is officially over for 2022. And so we wanted to have Senator Jen McKeown on to, of course, the cat has to wait until we start to make her appearance. She can never do it beforehand. But we kind of wanted to just go over, what happened this legislative session, a reminder of what all our bills are, what the purpose behind them is, and then kind of looking forward to this summer and the rest of this year and then next year, and how we can keep moving this issue forward. So with that being said, I just will maybe say, turn it over to Senator McKeown if you just want to say a couple words of welcome, and then we can get into the bills.
Sounds great. Hi, everybody. It's really nice to join everyone and to sort of have a debrief after this last session with good friends, and to talk about our legislation and the work that we're trying to do together. Thank you so much, Maya, for all of these lunches and all of the support. And really, we'll be following you and trying to support you too in your new role. That's really exciting. So yeah, I look forward to talking about our bills, talking about sort of the dynamic that I've observed at the Capitol and in the Senate in particular, in my first term as a new senator and elected official, and sort of hearing. I'm really curious to hear from all of you and your sort of thoughts and observations about where it feels like we're at, from not inside the legislature, but from outside as well, because of course a large part of what we want to be doing is to be bringing the work of all of you and the efforts that you're making at the grassroots level into the Capitol, into our work at the Capitol, and to help inform our strategy and the way that we move forward. And so I'll be I look forward to hearing from all of you and to sharing with you everything that I'm thinking and that I know from this year, this session. Thanks.
And yeah, just one final reminder, if you have any questions or anything like that, definitely feel free to put them in the Q&A, and we'll make sure to answer them as we go along. So, first and foremost, I want to talk about obviously probably our biggest effort, which is Prove It First. And Senator McKeown is proudly wearing her T-shirt, and we actually reached a pretty fun milestone. We officially have given out all of our first round of Prove It First T-shirts. We had quite a few boxes, so that was really fun. Maya, maybe just make sure to order another box or two before you leave, please, because we have a great demand for these. So that's really exciting. And just as a reminder, so Prove It First is a really common sense piece of legislation that was based on oh, great, more shirts on the way. So yeah, if you want your Prove It First T-shirt, your Prove It First lawn sign, sticker, whatever it may be, if you can contact Maya for another week here, or otherwise contact me or anyone else on our staff, and we'll get those for you, no cost. But the reason obviously is we want to see this become law, right? And we think this is a really common sense law, which essentially says, if you want to get a permit to do copper mining in Minnesota, you must first show us an example where it was done safely. And that's pretty basic standard, we think, especially when we're talking about some of the cleanest water on earth and the boundary waters, over 10% of the world's fresh water in Lake Superior. This is something that we really have a very, very high responsibility standard to take care of this. And so Prove It First would say, show us this independent scientific proof before you can even begin to do this process. Because as we know, as many people on this call will know, it's never been done before anywhere safely, copper sulfide mining, and it's never been done in Minnesota before. So oftentimes we'll hear people say, oh, we've been doing this for 140 years. This helped us win World War II. Well, actually, that's not accurate. That's iron mining. That's a completely different kind of mining. And so Prove It First, we had, I believe, up to 65 legislative sponsors of that bill, which is really awesome and really great. And Senator McKeown, you maybe want to talk a little bit about the dynamics of Prove It First, how far we've come, and maybe a little bit of how far we still have to go.
Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah, I'm the lead author, as I think Scott said, in the Senate of the Prove It First legislation, and I'm really proud to carry that in the Senate. And the pluses that I have seen so far are that, as Scott said, we have a lot of co-authors, a lot of people wanting to sign on to this legislation. Just on its face, it makes so much sense. People understand it. It goes right to the core of a lot of the claims that we have heard up north, that, oh no, we can do this. It'll be fine. It'll be safe. Just trust us on this. And so we're saying, okay, well, prove it first. Prove it before we're going to jump into this experiment on our waters and on our economy and on our public health and on our lives up here in northern Minnesota. It's not a big ask to actually have to show us an example before we would do it here in this water-rich environment with so much at stake. So a lot of people have signed on. I think that is really, really positive. And I think that as a movement together, and the work that the Friends have done and that all of us have done in our individual capacities and our different groups together, collectively, we've made a lot of progress toward building momentum for the passage of this legislation, and also using this piece of legislation as a sort of front example of the other types of common sense legislation that we need to have to protect our waters overall in northern Minnesota. So this is sort of the flagship legislation of the other legislation that we're going to talk about as well. And so I think all of that is really positive. We've built a lot of momentum with this legislation as the flagship piece, and a lot of support from my colleagues as well. I would say that probably in my observation of sort of where the sticking points are, because I'm sure people are curious about that. We've talked about that in previous meetings some as well. Of course, we don't have any Republican co-authors yet. So unfortunately, the Senate Republican caucus, and it matters more perhaps in the Republican caucus because they're in the majority, None of our Republican colleagues were willing to sign on as co-authors, and because of that, we weren't able to make any headway toward having it heard in the Senate. On the House side, I know that we were trying to make some inroads to perhaps get an informational hearing, just so that at least we could have that discussion. You know, the House is a great place to do that. Again, we have also multiple co-authors in the House, but we were not able to get an informational hearing at the House, in the House either. And, you know, I think that part of that is some of the organized opposition to what we're trying to do, specifically from some of the trades unions that have sort of teamed up in what I feel is sort of an unholy alliance with anti-union corporate power to try to move some of these projects and sort of force them on the people of northern Minnesota. So there is enough organized opposition, I think, and that is probably what is keeping things from moving forward more in the House, which is under Democratic control, and which we should be able to try to move things forward in the House, frankly. So yeah, those are sort of the positives and negatives as I see them right now. A lot of good momentum, a lot of good energy, a lot of people being sort of re-educated and reawakened about what's happening with these projects and where we're at, and giving people something to support and jump on board for, and they have. But the opposition and the promoters of these projects are very powerful. We know they have a lot of power politically, they have a lot of power economically, a lot of money behind them. They stand to make a lot of money if they push these projects through and other projects through. So they're not going to just, that's sort of where I see things, the status right now, but I look forward to talking more about it later.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. And the only thing that I would maybe add is, you know, a couple of things, you know, on the DFL leadership on the House side, you know, the one thing I would say, or even on the Senate side, is that, well, we weren't, you know, everything that Senator McKeown said is absolutely accurate. The one thing that we do have going for us, right, is as time moves on, new people come into leadership, right? And so, you know, before we didn't have necessarily like a senator like Senator Fong Her or Senator Kunesh in leadership, and both of them are huge supporters of this, right? And so that's super, you know, that's really great. It's the same with, you know, obviously she's going to be retiring, but Senator Franzen, you know, she was a co-author of this and then became leader, right? And so on the Senate side, they still weren't able to bring it to the floor, but, you know, that's a good step forward. And same with on the House side, you know, we see someone like Rep. Kali Hurt, right? She's a great supporter of this, and now she's in the leadership. And so, you know, the more that we can continue to, you know, continue this, beat this drum and keep this, the groundswell moving is really important. And then the other thing I'll just say is, you know, a shout out to some of the people are on the call today, but, you know, it's really is a coalition effort. It's not, you know, Friends of the Boundary Waters. It's not Senator McKeown. It's not Kelly Morrison, who's the House author, right? Or Jim Dabney, who's the lead House author. All right. It's all of us together. You know, it's Minnesota Center for Environmental Advocacy. It's Water Legacy. It's Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light. You know, it's local businesses that are part of the Proof First Coalition. You know, it's the DFL, EEC, you know, and things like that. Citizen groups that have been pushing this forward since before the Friends were even working on this bill, you know, and so, you know, that's what I really just want to emphasize. It's all of us together. And so really that's the most important thing, I think, for moving this forward is, you know, we often say, like, you know, the other side has the money, but we have the people, the science, and the facts on our side, and we got to make that enough. And I think that'll eventually will be enough. And you know, I'd much rather be us than them. You know, I'll say that for sure. And so the only other thing that I'll say is, you know, the legislative side is a really tough nut to crack, I guess, if you will, but it really allows us to move the issue forward in all aspects, right? You know, in public opinion, you know, we've seen with President Biden really stepping in and enforcing the science on these projects and really stopping the Twin Metals project. And then the EPA a couple of weeks ago, if people aren't aware, recommended against the polymet mine because of the likelihood that it will impair downstream water, specifically for the Fond du Lac ban, but also for, you know, everything that's downstream, Lake Superior, City of Duluth. And so all this stuff that we can do is really important because it's really an overall holistic effort to really stop these dangerous projects, but then also upgrade Minnesota's laws, update maybe is a better word than update Minnesota's laws to really be able to assess the actual threat that we're facing here. And so that's kind of the one thing to keep in mind with this. And then the other thing on the Republican side that I'll say is that, we are a nonpartisan organization. We certainly believe that this legislation should be the law of the land, and we think it should be the position of both parties. I think that if you look at polling, Democrats, I believe that the best polling that we've seen, best polling available is that 80% of Democrats support or oppose new mining near the boundary waters, but it's actually pretty split amongst Republicans as well. And so, as to the question of we have not got the co-sponsors on that yet, but I know that there was some efforts at the GOP conventions this year to introduce proof of purpose as a resolution, and I know that it passed at least one precinct caucus level, thanks to our good friend Maria Jensen for that, and so in her efforts to organize around that, but really trying to get those things going. So we certainly feel like this should be a bipartisan effort, and we'll continue to work on that. And if anybody has any ideas, please, we're always open to how we can do things better or try new things or anything like that. So that's, we haven't given up on that, but obviously it has been more difficult sledding in that area. So on to the next one, next question, and I see there's a question in chat about this, so I might actually bump this up. As I mentioned, all these pieces of legislation, this suite of legislations, if you will, suite of bills, if you will, are really designed to protect Minnesota's environment, make sure our laws are actually our laws are actually protected, because that's something that we'll often hear from the other side is, oh, Minnesota has the strictest environmental standards in the world, which is, again, frankly inaccurate. There's many states that have more strict environmental laws than us. Like Montana, because they had these massive pollutions, right? They had these massive Superfund sites. But also there's a lot of countries, like in Brazil, Peru, Chile, like all those countries ban the type of dam that is currently approved for polymet. And so when we hear people say, oh, well, if it's not safe, it won't get approved here. Well, that's just not true. And that's actually something that most of these people know, right? Is they know that. And so one of the other things that we want to do to make sure that our laws actually are, evaluating these projects is do something called, well, but we call it the DNR Conflict of Interest Act. And this is pretty simple. And what it says is, if you want to get, now I'm going into my prayer first. What it says is DNR right now, currently, a lot of people don't realize this. They have in their mission, they have a mission to, one, protect our natural resources, but also to promote mining. And so you can imagine that comes into conflict of interest, especially when we're talking about something that's literally the most polluting industry in America in heavy metals mining, which is copper mining, nickel, basically any non-iron mining. And so what this bill would do is shift the legislation or the responsibility to promote mining away from DNR and to DEED, the Department of Employment and Economic Development. And so that DNR can just focus on environmental protection when they're issuing the permits. And so, Jen, can you tell us a little bit more about why this is so important and why you want to push this bill forward?
Yeah, for sure. I really like this bill a lot. I think that, one of the things that it's sort of on the surface level, very common sense that we would not want to have that conflict of interest within our DNR, right? When they're looking at permitting a project, that they're looking out for the people of Minnesota and our environmental quality, right? And our water quality and all of that, that is what they're really trying to do, is to look out for our interests, the people's interests. But right now they have this dual mission, which is the economic development piece. And that is also, right, in our interest as well, in the interest of the people of Minnesota, to have sustainable, healthy, long-term quality economic development in our communities. So they're sort of pulled two ways in that sense. And I really think that, so it'll clear things up to have that mission separated. We want the Department of Economic Development to handle economic development, to do the promotion for any type of projects that people want to do, to move forward in that way. That could be a totally separate thing. And then in the DNR, they're looking out for our natural resources. They're the Department of Natural Resources. That should be their mission. That should be what they're charged with. And one of the reasons why I really like this legislation as well is because, to me, it cuts to some of the initial problems with the posture of our environmental laws and regulations and the way that we've set things up, sort of the way. And what the way reflects right now in a lot of ways is a old colonialist sort of manifest destiny attitude toward development of resources. It really does. We have, this, that's reflected in having these dual roles within the DNR. We had told the DNR initially, it's in our interest to just develop all of these resources, develop our, build and make things out of these resources. Don't necessarily keep them wild. That's maybe not in our interest. We want to develop, like go forth and develop this land and this water. And that is sort of the program that our country has been running on, right? Our world has been running on. And that's the sort of model that has gotten us to where we are right now in terms of climate crisis, in terms of a lot of these issues that we're dealing with. So this is just one of those pieces of legislation that's just sort of representative of those larger picture issues that that if we did this simple thing and separated those two callings, those two pushes, the economic development and the natural resource preservation and protection, I think that we would have a much cleaner process, and the roles would just be, people would also, I think, have a better sense that their government is looking after them. I know that in my city of Duluth, there is this sort of sense that our government agencies, in regard to the Polymet project in particular, have really not looked after our interests, right? That they have really been looking out for industry, looking out for big corporate interests in our state over our interests, or they've seen that what's good for big corporate is good for the people of Duluth. What's good for big industry is good for the people of northeastern Minnesota. And of course, we know that that's not true, and that presents a real problem when we don't have people that are in our agencies just purely looking out for our public health, for our environment, for our natural resources, and they have that kind of conflict. So yeah, I love this bill because of sort of the bigger picture that it represents, and just the simplicity of separating those two conflicting roles.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's kind of has to be a mindset shift, right? Because it's almost like for the first time in human history, more is not always better, right? Mm-hmm. And we're really starting to hit that point, and we're running up against this, whether it's climate change, clean water availability, whatever it might be. More is not better anymore. And finding those ways to be sustainable and protect our clean water, has to be in my opinion, and certainly I think yours and everybody on this call probably, has to be the mission of the agencies, right? And so, there's a lot of really great career people who work for DNR, work for MPCA, who do this, basic science on this, and they say, okay, well, these projects are going to pollute, and then that kind of gets shipped out the window by the leadership because it's a political, it's more of a political decision, or they're feeling like they have to live up to this mission to promote mining, right? And so that's, it's also really for a lot of those people who go into it to be career scientists, you'd be surprised, almost our entire expert team that like reviews comments, reviews these plans for us at the Friends, are former DNR or MPCA scientists that feel like they didn't get to have their voice heard when they were working there on these projects, and now they want to help really make their voice heard. And I think that really says a lot. The other thing I'll say is there's a question from Mike in the chat. This was kind of why I wanted to go to this. And Mike mentions the resolution process at the DFL convention. And so for people who don't know this, this is something I kind of, something that is a little bit complex, but essentially what we've tried to do is both parties have a process for setting their official party platform. And so it's, whatever is essentially the views of the party, whatever laws they support, right? And at this past DFL convention, we were there because, we were trying to push Prove It First. And we can talk about that. I'm going to talk about that a little bit at the end, what happened with that. But we were successful. And one of the other ones was actually this law, this one that says shift DNR's responsibility to D. And that did pass. And so that was a really great win for us. That's officially for the next 2 years, part of the DFL action agenda, and so obviously candidates can decide their own platform, but this is, the platform that DFL voters want to see their elected officials follow. And so that's really good. And it gives us a really good foothold to say, hey, please support the will of your voters and support this law going forward. And so that was a really good win, Mike. And that's essentially what that means, is that, because that passed, support for this law will go forward. And so, again, as we're doing this, then there's some comments about the DFL, the Prove It First, and I kind of want to save that for the end. But absolutely, it's really important, and this one did pass and go forward. And so it's really exciting. And I think Maya either put in the chat, or she will put in the chat. We have a page where you can send, use quick action links for all these bills to send to your legislator to say, support this bill, and it'll automatically go to your senator or your legislator, because as Senator McKeown can tell you, it really, really makes a difference, especially at the state level. If a senator gets 30 emails about something, that's a heck of a lot of emails. Am I right, Senator McKeown?
Yeah, definitely. Mm-hmm.
And so that's one of the reasons that, we really like to use those citizen action forums. The next bill that we also introduced this year was called Bad Actor Bill. Now, this is a bill that's, again, really common sense, very straightforward. And it essentially says, if you want to get one of these permits, do this type of copper mining, you cannot be a company that essentially broke the law in tribal laws, state law, federal law, international law, on a number of areas like bribery, child labor, environmental pollution. And the reason that we have this specifically is because there's so many bad acts by these parent companies of these mines. And so when we hear the proposed mines like Polymet, which is the one that's upstream of Lake Superior, or Twin Metals, which is the one that was upstream of the Boundary Waters, these are not just your mom and pop artisanal mining shop, right? They're shell corporations for some of the biggest conglomerates on earth. And with Twin Metals, we're talking about Antofagasta out of Chile, and with Polymet, I'm talking about Glencore, which is literally one of the, like, just set a Google alert for Glencore, and you'll see something almost every single day. It's crazy, like every single day. They just settled a case for committing bribery. They settled a case for pleaded guilty to I guess what would you say, breaking the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, to committing bribery in the UK, in Australia. These are the same companies that own mines using child labor in Africa. And so, if we really want to give these mine companies an incentive to, one, change their ways, but also to ensure that, we have good stewards of our water, right? We want to make sure it's not some of the worst actors on earth. And that's no joke. That's what we're talking about here. And so maybe, Jen, can you tell us a little bit more about, Bad Actor Bill, why you wanted to support this, and, how it all came together?
Yeah, the Bad Actor Bill is great. And it's super funny that this spring, after we introduced it, like, more news kept coming out about Glencore. I mean, it was just unbelievable. It was like sort of perfect timing. But yeah, this is a bill that allows our agencies to deny permits based on the parent companies, or the company itself, or its like associates, like connected to the corporation, have been involved in environmental degradation, fraud, child labor, various bad acts around the world. And we know this watching some of these big mining behemoths. They operate internationally. we mean nothing to them. They literally want to come in and take and take. And so all of this, the dividing us in our communities, dividing trade versus environmental, dividing the house of labor, like all of that nonsense is so that they can extract profit from our land and from our waters and from our labor. You know, like that is what they're aiming to do. And these corporations, many of them, are really bad actors. The bill is appropriately titled. They have committed bad acts around the world. And so it is just really important. It's another tool to be able to look at these corporations that are proposing to set up such dangerous types of industry in our region, and to say, okay, if we're even going to consider a project like that, we also should be able to say no on the basis that because of your record around the world, we're just going to say no. We just don't want to do business with you. And so I like to think of it as a sort of background check for a large corporation. You know, we have background checks for teachers, we have background checks for childcare workers, for people who work in nursing homes, for people who work with vulnerable adults, for good reason, right? We want to make sure that the people who are doing certain jobs are appropriate to fulfill that role and aren't going to pose a danger to the people they're serving and in the environment where they're working. And this is something I think is long overdue, really, this type of approach toward corporate power, to look at the corporation and to be able to say, you know what, like based on your track record and the things that you've been involved with in other places around the world, we're not gonna, one, reward you with being able to come here and profit off of our labor and our land and our water. And we also just don't trust you. We just don't want to do business with you because you've proven yourself and you've shown yourself as a corporation to not be trustworthy in other places in the world. So yeah, it's just another tool in this toolbox that if we can see that passed into legislation, I think that would be a really good thing to move forward with.
Absolutely. And I think, again, it's, as Maria points out in the chat, right, this is something that goes across the aisle, right? This is just, if you're a Minnesotan, in it's common sense, right? Like, we wouldn't let just anybody take care of our kids. We wouldn't let just anybody take care of our, elderly family members. And it's the same thing. Like, we wouldn't just let anybody take care of our water, and so that's essentially what the bad actor bill is all about. And so, we, again, got good traction on this bill with a lot of legislators, but is kind of the same position as these other three bills. And then this next one that I want to talk about, which is really the fourth out of four that did not move forward. And then we kind of had one that did move forward that we'll talk about. The fourth piece is called the Taxpayer Protection Act. And this just really fits in, again, with all these different legislative pieces that we're talking about. Now, the Taxpayer Protection Act is very simple. All it says is, so already in Minnesota law, if you want to do these types of mines, you're supposed to put up a certain amount of money for cleanup. This is not even with this is not even with a disaster. This is just, there's another reason why I say, like, when I laugh when people say, oh, well, the permit shows that it's going to be safe. Well, no, actually the permit allows them to pollute, right? The Polymet project was permitted to destroy over 800 acres of wetlands, which would have been the largest permitted destruction of wetlands in Minnesota history prior to the Biden administration reversing that and saying, oh, wait, actually that would impact downstream water, obviously, right? And so this is really a way of saying, of addressing a problem that we see with these projects. And I think Sen McKenna has to go let the dogs out. She was worried about that earlier. But really what it says is, right now, the problem is these mining companies don't have to put this money up front in cash. And we have a really long webinar about this that really goes into all the details about this. Maybe Maya, you can post that in the chat when you get a chance. But essentially the problem is, these companies were allowed to say, Polymet was kind of the first one, so that's what we can really base this off. And they were really allowed to say, hey, we're going to get these stocks and, these bonds, these letters of credit, maybe letters, and things like that. So that when you look at it in year 10 of the mine, there's actually a $1 billion gap in between the amount of money, the amount of money put up by Polymet like actually put up, and the amount of money it would cost if they had to stop and clean up then. So that's saying that if in year 10, PolyMet simply said, we're declaring bankruptcy. Right now, Glencore, which is the parent company, they're not named on any of the permits. And so there's another side note. Tell Governor Walz you want him to add them to the permits, because that's something that he could do at any time. But as long as they're not on the permits, they can simply declare bankruptcy. And then who has to clean that up? Who has to pay for that? It's me, you, everybody on this call. It's the taxpayers of Minnesota, right? We have no way to hold them accountable. And just as an example, in Brazil, when one of the tailings dams collapsed, that is, again, it's called the upstream tailings dam, is in Brumadinho, Brazil. You can look this up. It was a massive collapse. It was a tragedy. It killed over 250 people. That's the same type of dam that's approved for PolyMet right now. And so, if that were to collapse, it costs $6 billion to clean it up in Brazil. And how are we going to come up with $6 billion? I know legislators, and I don't blame you, you don't want to have to raise taxes to pay for a mining collapse, right? Nor should you. And so what the Taxpayer Protection Act says is simply put up the money up front and in cash. So that way, if something happens, we know that we at least have the money to clean it up. You can never really clean it up to what it was, which is why we don't want these projects. This is why we have it. But at the very least, if you're going to do that, let us get the money up front and in cash, so our taxpayers don't have to pay for that. And that's simply what this bill is. And so, anything you want to add on that, Senator McKeown?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you gave a really good overview of it. I think that it's again goes to sort of the heart of what we're dealing with a lot of these corporations. Like, what makes this whole junket profitable is to pass on the risk and to pass on the cost to the people, right? That's how this whole model works. So it will be interesting, if we actually assert the people's interests and say, as taxpayers, we don't want to be on the hook if and when this disaster happens. So we need you to put up the cash up front. So I'm sort of curious as whether not having that guarantee, they would even find the project to be worthwhile to pursue, only because the whole model is built on this idea of like, we're going to take and take, and you all are just going to give and give and give. And I don't, I am curious to know whether they would go forward if we were to actually say, we don't want to be on the hook for a potential disaster, and we need you to actually guarantee that you will pay for it. So exactly. I think it's a great piece of legislation. Yeah.
Absolutely. And as Patrick here said in the chat, privatize the gain and socialize the, socialize the loss. That's exactly what it is. Exactly. And, we don't even have to look that far to see an example of this. We can just look at line 3, which is Enbridge line 3, right? The same groups that are telling us right now that PolyMet and Swim Metals will be safe, no pollution. They said, guess what? Enbridge is going to be safe, no pollution. Guess what? Within 6 months, flash forward, it already polluted, right? And so, they had to pay a fine, but guess what? That's a negligible amount for these companies. It's actually cheaper in the business plan to simply not comply with the law and pay the minimal fine to them than it is to actually build it up to the top, possible standard that you can build it up to. And so that's exactly what Senator McKeown is talking about, and she's spot on. And so this is really a way of saying, holding them accountable for that. And not only that, also requiring them to get insurance for disaster in case there was a disaster. And so, we really feel like, as Senator McKeown said, if they won't even build this project, knowing that they have to pay for, if they know that they have to pay for the damages, that says pretty much everything you need to know about the project right there. And so that's really what this bill is all about. And yeah, like I said, it does get very technical. So if you want, check out that webinar that Maya just posted. It's with our board chair, he's a longtime, his name's John Gappa. He's a longtime CFO for a number of businesses, and he does an amazing job of really breaking down this from the business side and why it makes sense for them to do it this way, but why it's horrible for Minnesota to do it this way. And so that's something definitely worth checking out. And again, if you want to tell your legislators, yeah, exactly. And so definitely please use that link to tell your legislators to support this, any and all of these bills. So the last bill I want to talk about today, Senator McEwen, is what you and we've been calling the 50-year Clean Water Plan bill. Now this is a little bit more exciting. We got a little bit more action with this this year. It was in some ways our attempt to really make it the least controversial bill that we could, but also still be very helpful, obviously, to the state of Minnesota. It's pretty simple. All it does is directs. It would have directed funding to the U of M Water Council, which is an independent scientific body within the U of M, and you can look this up. It's a lot of different experts from biology, geology, chemistry, all the things like that are really important to really studying all the different aspects of water, right? Because while we obviously are talking about a very specific one, there's many other areas, and you can go online, and we produce a report with Land Stewardship Project, Water Legacy, a number of other environmental organizations that really looked at all the different threats to Minnesota's water. And what we found was there's a lot of threats to Minnesota's water, and in fact, we're really in a crisis right now. 56% of Minnesota's waters are already impaired, and so what this bill would have done is just say, develop a plan, take all the plans that are out there. There's been some research on this area, some research on this area, bring it together. And essentially study it. So make us a plan. Let's have a plan for 50 years of clean water, because we're already looking at states trying to buy our water. California right now, just following any of the stuff that's going on there with their water situation. We don't want that here, and it's really easy to take for granted. But if we pollute, our largest source of fresh water in Lake Superior, our cleanest source of fresh water in the boundary waters, is, as well as Mississippi, all these other rivers that we have, lakes, we're not going to be the same state that we think we are. And so maybe Senator McEwen, you can tell us a little bit more about, how this bill went forward, and the success that we had, and then kind of, your last ditch effort to save the bill. And there was a bit of exciting moments and that happened with this.
Yeah. Yeah, former Governor Arne Carlson speaks really beautifully about the need for this bill and just the real crisis that we are upon, that is upon us, that we are entering into this era here where clean water is increasingly scarce and increasingly valuable as a commodity. And we're just humming along with business as usual, right? And we've already seen a couple of instances. I know on the Environmental Policy Committee in the Senate, we saw, a bill come through basically giving an exemption to permitting requirements for the DNR for water projects in around, I think it was White Bear Lake. It was a regional sort of. They're asking for special treatment because they had a water crisis down there and they don't really know how to handle it. Yeah. So we foresee, we know that we are going to have increasing crises in regard to clean water throughout our state, and that we need a comprehensive plan going forward if we are to guarantee clean water for our state's needs for the next half a century, for the next 50 years. So the bill set forth it's affordable in the realm of the allocation that we make at the state level, a very common sense directing a study to be done by the Water Council with the U of M, and to put together some recommendations for that plan. And it really is what the bill sets forth, this idea that we're going to ask experts and scientists and people who study this to really look at what the situation is and the projections going forward, and to make recommendations to us based on that science about what we should be doing, what we shouldn't be doing, what are the policy sort of recommendations going forward. We're talking about our water. It's our water. We're one of the states that has the most water, the most fresh water, but we are also, as Scott said, already in a crisis mode in certain areas of our state, and really this is the time that we need to be thinking about this. So we did have some traction on the House side. This bill was included in the higher ed omnibus bill on the House side. Representative Morrison was successful in being able to see that happen. So we were very hopeful that it would make it through to the final negotiation. Unfortunately, it didn't. It didn't make it through into the final omnibus bill. So what we tried to do on the Senate side is I made a motion on the floor on one of the last days, the second to the last day of session. I made a motion on the Senate floor to take the bill out of committee and to consider it on the floor of the Senate. We could have done that. It would have been a very, as I said, a pretty modest allocation from the general fund to just go ahead and make this allocation because the study needs to go forward now. And so we needed a 60% threshold, I believe, to get it off of the floor. And we didn't have that. But we did have 30, I think we had a majority of the vote. The vote was very interesting the way it turned out. Yeah, 34. So it looked like we had maybe won the vote at first glance. You looked at the board and we had more votes to consider it than not. Because we did have some Republicans join us in that vote. We sort of gave them something that looks like a very environmentally friendly vote, but it was just to bring that to the floor to consider it. And it did not have enough votes to do that, and then we didn't consider it. So it was an effort to sort of make the point of this is serious. This is something that we really should consider. And I would just say this is sort of an opportunity to say this, but the environmental work that happened on the Senate side was extremely frustrating. I mean, in the last days, when we were considering the omnibus bills that were being put together, we had the chair of the environmental committee denying human-caused climate change on the floor of the Minnesota Senate in a couple different ways. Yes, there's a couple different quotes that are just like so bizarre, and he's the chair of the environmental committee. So that really tells you sort of the state of things. We're just stuck in the Senate environmental wise. I'm really glad to hear someone had written in the comments or questions and answers that the Republican family and friends are on board with Prove It First and on board with the bad actor bill. That's fantastic. I have also spoken to people who are on board with these ideas and these concepts, who identify politically as being more conservative, and that makes a ton of sense. It's actually sort of conservative to say, we got to save and preserve these amazing features, our clean water in our state and everything that depends on that. So I just want to put a plug in for everybody who's participating. Your family and friends who are more conservative, who do identify politically as Republican or Republican leaning, work on them, talk to them about these issues. We need this to truly be bipartisan. And it is in design, it's bipartisan, but we need that bipartisan support from the Republican side of the aisle. And we need to sort of bring some of those Republicans back. They have a very disciplined caucus. They are very, very disciplined in terms of their votes. We very rarely see them break. So we do need that work done, more of that work done. If you live in a district with Republican representatives or senator, work on them. We're in election season. This is a perfect time to show up to forums, show up to meetings, and to be asking candidates directly to let them know that you support Prove It First, you support protecting our waters with this legislation, bad actor bill, et cetera, taxpayer protection, and ask them to support it. Just directly ask them. Can I add one more thing real quick, Scott?
Please.
One argument that we have just recently started hearing up in Duluth, I just wanted to bring it up with this group to sort of prep people for this. One argument that we've just started hearing is that it is an allegation that the Prove It First legislation represents politicians putting their fingers on the scale against, sort of that the Prove It First, the argument goes, Prove It First sort of tilts the scales against business or against jobs for the trades in favor of protecting environment. And we just shouldn't, we should take a hands-off approach, and we should let the process work it out. We've heard that argument before. Like, let the process happen, let the laws play out, and then they go into us having these really strong environmental protections, et cetera, et cetera. But one of the things that I wanted to offer to all of you is that the scales are already tipped in terms of power, in terms of influence, in terms of money, resources. Industry has already tipped those scales. They've tipped the scales within our government, within our legislature, our agencies, just in terms of the power and influence that they wield. The scales are already tipped. Prove it first, and this legislation that we're talking about today is an attempt to equalize those scales back to where they should be. So to just make things fair, just prove it first. Just show us, right? Just protect the taxpayers. Just allow us to say no to these rogue criminal corporations running around the world. Let us have our agencies not have a conflict of interest. These are very, very simple. Let us have a water plan for the next 50 years. All of these pieces of legislation are very common sense. They are in no way tipping the scales in some sort of unequal way. They're actually asking for fairness and an even-handed approach toward protecting clean water, toward protecting our environment, and also moving forward with sustainable economic development, real economic development that is going to not endanger our public health, that is going to provide living, thriving wages to people in our communities. And we can have those things. We really can. This is just a very weird model, this copper sulfide mining extractive industry that we're seeing, and something that we should absolutely be asking these questions, these basic questions about, well, prove it first. Like, show us that you could do this safely. You say that you can, you claim that you can. Show us where it's ever been done. Show us. So I just wanted to let people know we were hearing that in Duluth in one of the House races that's heading toward primary in August already, and just sort of let people know that was what I was hearing.
No, it's spot on, and it's tilting the scale towards science, right? and if you're opposed to that, I think that's a pretty big red flag, right? And so, we're 100% with that. And I know we need to wrap up here, but a couple things, when it reminded me of when you're talking about, maybe we need to do a webinar just debunking all the bad faith arguments, because I think we could spend 2 hours on that alone, right? But one that really comes up when you're talking about the, environmental chair in the Senate not believing in climate change. It's the same way that, Pete Stauber, who's a congressperson for the 8th district, tells us we need twin metals to stop climate change, but he doesn't even believe in climate change, right? And so it's like, we're taking our advice from the worst possible people on how to do that. And
I think more people are seeing through these arguments. We have a great candidate, Jen Schultz, a former representative in the House now. She still is. She's transitioning out of the state house, and she's running for Congress against Representative Stauber. And she is making some really powerful arguments that have to do with a lot of the things that we've been talking about. Like, focus on the people, on the workers. Like, where is the real concern, the genuine concern for workers doing this work? And that is why I think, for me, the alliance that we've seen between some of the trades and these industry interests is so unholy, because so much of the trades leadership knows better. They should know better. Like, this whole scales thing, like, that's labor, organized labor. Business is much more powerful. The bosses are much more powerful. Corporate power is much more powerful. Those scales are inherently tipped against the people, just like they are right now in terms of what we're dealing with our clean water. So people in labor do know. I think that they know. They have a sense that what we need to do is make things more equal, to empower regular people, to have agency in their lives and their work, and also to have agency to protect fundamental things like clean water in our environment that everything comes out of. Yeah.
Absolutely. So just want to run through a couple of quick questions that I saw that we might not have gotten time to address. So first of all, like I said, with that party platform process, ourselves, along with a lot of groups, along with some of the people that I've seen on the chat here, We were all at the DFL convention trying to push Prove It First. As was mentioned, it did need 60% to be added to party platform, and we got 58%, which is a little bit tough to swallow. But as was mentioned, the trade unions were unfortunately, I think they're making the wrong calculation, but they were really pushing against this, and they succeeded in making it at least controversial enough where it's not like 58% voted yes and 42% voted no. If you abstained from voting, it was essentially a no. You needed 60%. And so we basically needed like 30 more people to vote with us, and someone can check my math on that, but we're going to get it in 2 years from now. So everyone, whoever participated in that process, thank you so much. And, it really goes to show, and again, I think somebody put in the chat, but I believe Prove It First had either the second or third most submissions at the precinct caucus level, at the grassroots level. So it's even more popular at the grassroots level, right? This is only a certain amount of people that actually make it all the way to the DFL convention. So, we have grassroots support. We're moving it forward. That's super important. And then the other thing I wanted to add was that someone mentioned essentially that, is finding other jobs important, and that's absolutely important. And that's really what we want to do here at the Friends. We're always we're always open to other ideas if people have them. We want to support economic development. We want to support good trade union jobs. We want to support all union jobs. It just can't be at the expense of Lake Superior or the Boundary Waters. And unfortunately, that's what the science tells us will happen. And so we really want to focus on that. And we're going to be looking into other ways to really, support those movements going forward and hopefully lessen the demand for some of these jobs. And then the last thing that I'll say is if you want to support the Friends and our work and all of our stuff here, there's really 3 things that you can do. One, take action with those forums that Maya posted. Tell your legislator, call Governor Walz. Governor Walz, his position on these mines is essentially nada. He's not really said much either way. So we really want to show him that his voters want him to take an issue, a stance on this and be an environmental champion. Tell your legislators. The second thing is join our Citizen Action Network. That will be Maya runs that now, and whoever replaces Maya will continue to run that. But essentially, it's a group of our supporters where we'll just send you opportunities to take action, opportunities to volunteer, share this story that we got, whatever it may be. But that's really a way to stay plugged in and get an ask, something to do, like basically quick ask every week or every other week. And so please join that. You can email me or Maya to get added to that list. And then lastly, we are going to be at the state fair this year. And if you want to volunteer, we always need help with those shifts. It's actually really fun. You get a free ticket, you get a free t-shirt. And, we get to talk to a lot of people, because that's one of the things that we realize too, is that just frankly, not enough people know about this issue. Not even everybody that goes to Boundary Waters knows about these proposed mines, right? And so that's really a way to have a good time, talk to some clean water supporters, get a free ticket to the fair and help us out. So that's really what I'd ask of everybody. If we didn't get to your questions, please shoot me an email and we're happy to answer them. Anything you want to leave us with today, Senator McEwen?
Oh, I just want to thank everybody for all of the work. I know that we're all working in our own capacities as much as we can and doing the best that we can. And I just want to thank each and every one of you who have joined us for the things that you do in your community, with your family and friends, politically, the reach outs that you do. All of it really, really matters. And together we keep on with this momentum. We keep on coming together and doing the work together. And I do believe that we will succeed. We will. We have to. And I just want to thank all of you for everything that you're doing toward these efforts.
Absolutely. Well said. And everybody, thank you so much for joining us today. Check out our website for more information, and email me or Maya Maya for the next week and a half, me for ongoing. But thanks again for everybody, and thanks so much for being here. So thanks everybody. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks everyone. Bye-bye.